This is a playthrough I've been looking forward to for a very long time, as the conclusion to what is probably one of my all-time favorite dungeon crawlers. I couldn't have been more hyped to see what this game has to offer. Released 6 years after the original, and 2 years after the sequel, this game had a ton of time to develop into something special. There were entire worlds of lore to draw from, and the team in charge here was the famous Westwood Studios, the kings of 90s dungeon crawling. Despite that, the game released to poor reviews, and is seen by many as the worst entry in the series. Not to put the cart before the horse here, but even now, 26 years later, it's clear this is not only the weakest game in the series, but also one so wildly removed, you would be hard-pressed to convince me this game was made in the same universe. Forget about the same dev team. It is a far cry from the majesty that was Throne of Chaos. And even when compared to the less successful Guardians of Destiny, it's clear Lands of Lore 3 is the weakest entry in the trilogy. It's not even a contest. But why was it so much worse? I hope you'll join me in exploring that.
All is ready for my departure. Place the seal after I have passed through the shining path, and all my magics will cease to exist on this mortal plane.
All your magics?
Goodbye, Jacken.
As I said, this game is literally worlds apart from the legendary Throne of Chaos, and I don't mean just in quality. The gameplay mechanics are such a step away, it probably doesn't even share the same genre anymore. While Guardians of Destiny took the first step in moving the series away from a traditional dungeon crawler, this title brings it firmly into the realm of a glorified hack and slash. Like Guardians of Destiny, the game once again has you playing as a single character instead of a group, and once again that character is chosen for you. There's no option to play as someone else. Unlike Guardians of Destiny, where Luther was a charismatic and often interesting character you could sympathize with, the main character here was insufferable. His name is Copper, and he just comes across as this super whiny wood elf type character. He's not a wood elf, but he really looks like one.
What is that?
We'll discuss what he actually is in the story section, but suffice to say he is a very weak character both in design and personality. If you're going to have your entire game focus on one main protagonist, you better make them likable. Also, my Walrus deep lore for the video is that I have an irrational hatred of wood elves. Come at me, tree dwellers. In a weird twist, your character development here is tied to one of 4 guilds. The Cleric Guild, the Fighters Guild, the Mages Guild, or the Hidden Thieves Guild. This only provides the illusion of choice. You are free, and really encouraged, to join all 4 guilds. There's no downside to being in them all. In theory, the way you level is to use skills associated with each guild, and they'll level passively, increasing your ability with those skills. So fighting in melee should boost your Fighters Guild level, picking locks should increase your Thieves Guild level, and casting spells should increase your Mage level. However, I have to say it feels like the system doesn't work. I started the game trying to be a mage primarily, but my fighter skills kept improving. I practically never used thief skills, but they always seemed to keep up regardless. In fact, I can confidently say that by the end of the game, all 4 schools were nearly equal. More than once, I would kill something with a spell or a melee attack and be rewarded with a thief level. It seemed whatever calculation that was supposed to be happening to level your character was broken. It's not a huge deal, but it really made your character feel muddy and unspecialized the whole game. I really didn't feel I developed a unique character at all. There's so little replayability when you just get access to all the classes equally. It would have made so much more sense to limit the player to 1 guild per playthrough. Or, you know, have a party with unique characters. Outside of leveling your skills in the guild, you could also gain ranks, which were directly tied to completing quests. Completing enough quests for a guild would eventually rank you up, and these rank ups would provide passive bonuses, like faster mana regen, more accurate bows, and faster attacks. Once again, you're sort of encouraged to work for all 4 guilds, and the quests are often done in the background, so you're very likely to just do them all. There are less than 5 quests per guild, and most are quick, so there isn't much reason to skip them. Some are broken though, more on that later. So the character development sort of sucks. What about the combat and the gameplay? It's okay, but it has some pretty glaring flaws. Melee combat is as simple as walk up to your enemy and swing away. It by far does the most damage. So much so that by the late game, nothing else even works. It's just that much more damage. We're talking 1 to 2-shotting most enemies in melee, where a ranged attack or spell would take 20 to 30 hits. Just incomparably better. Annoyingly, melee had this visual glitch where you couldn't see your attack animation, so you'd sort of just stand there furiously clicking with literally no feedback, outside your enemies eventually dying. The biggest upgrades you could get in the game were new melee weapons. And again, things were wildly inconsistent here. About mid-game, I found a sword that took my melee damage from 48 to 207. Just wildly better than anything else in the game to that point. There was one secret upgrade I found later that outclassed it, but otherwise, nothing else even came remotely close. And this weapon is just given to you for no cost during a conversation. There are shops that open up only after you've received this weapon, where everything in there is just leagues worse. What is the point? Super Weapon of Death costs nothing and is granted with 0 effort. The ranged combat outside of spells consisted of shooting various bows and crossbows. Not bad really, just super bland. Point at thing and press attack. There are some cool subtypes of ranged weapons, but even the best feel like pea shooters, taking most of the joy out of it. There's no ammo in the game either. You can just shoot rapidly to your heart's content. There was a relatively in-depth magic system on offer here too, and a ton of spells. Unfortunately, most boiled down to the same thing. Either hit scan or projectile based, and doing a different element of damage. The spells are so similar, in fact, there's a ring you get late game that just turns all your lightning spells into fire spells. They can just be swapped 1 for 1 because they all feel the same. And my big rant to follow up is that you only get this ring after completing the ice world. So the one place you would really want fire, you won't have it. There are a bunch of protective spells to use here as well, but I only really found much use of the poison shield, which as you might expect prevents poison. All the other protective spells felt worthless, as this game has some weird damage scaling. When you get hit, you'll either take almost no damage, or you'll instantly be removed from existence. The protections seem to do nothing to alleviate this, and I never felt there was anything I could do when I died, except try again and hope for better RNG. There were a few super spells that were specifically powered by ancient magic, which in this game is given by a special consumable item. 1 item used equals 1 spell cast. I can't comment that heavily on the ancient magic, as I literally only used it in the last fight of the game. When I did use it, all I can say is, meh. The protective spells and heals were effective. The damaging spells seemed to literally do nothing. This was sort of a theme with the regular magic as well though. Early game damage spells are actually pretty effective, but low mana and slow regen makes their usage intermittent at best. Late game, you'll have a ton of mana, but your spells are pathetically weak, taking dozens of hits to hurt enemies. Add on that everything in this game has resistances, and magic just felt useless as a result most of the time. Even endgame spells that ate a huge chunk of your mana would do the most piddly, unsatisfying damage. More than anything, I found myself missing that multi-leveled magic system from Guardians of Destiny. This felt like a clear step in the opposite direction. In terms of the visuals, I actually don't mind it. A lot of reviews criticize the look of the game, and while it doesn't compare to Throne of Chaos, it's about as pretty as I would expect any early 3D RPG to be. Except Copper, the main character. He's hideous.
Ugh. Brother, ugh.
Obviously this game is more similar to Guardians of Destiny than Throne of Chaos, but instead of the FMV models we had before, here the game uses full 3D models. And I really don't mind them. They sort of have that early charm, using weird tricks to make things look more alive. The weirdly expanding and contracting models to try and show movement sort of reminds me of Diablo 1's 3D for some reason.
Please, no hurt, no kill.
Something the game did do very wrong was scaling. You'll notice a lot of NPCs are either massive compared to the player, or laughably small. This extended to items as well. A short sword pickup would be twice the height of the character, and these corpses that are everywhere are huge. Like, are they the corpses of giants? I get adding some size to pickups for readability, but the messed up sizes on characters and environmental items was pretty glaringly wrong. Walking in on meeting the Thieves Guild leader, I felt like a literal child.
Hey, keep it in the circus!
Additionally, the game suffered from the warping textures when looking up and down that plagued early 3D games. I can sort of compare it to Duke 3D, where everything stretches and skews when you look around, but it's far worse here. There really wasn't a ton of platforming in the game, but the scaling and warping issues made it a hassle when you did encounter it. And forget about climbing down a ladder. Even if you can see it, you'll never get on it. Half my deaths in this game were from falling in pits trying to get onto a ladder. For sound, it's fine really. Suitable fantasy noises and music. There was an issue where music would just cut out at points, so you could be in pitched combat in complete silence, then get some bombastic battle music while selling junk at the shop. Everything is voice acted, and I really have no complaints here. It could use subtitles is all I'll say, but I attribute that to being old and deaf, so it's probably a personal problem.
Patrick Stewart isn't in this one. Sad face.
As much as I'm dumping on this game, it isn't all bad. While everything here is kinda bland and mediocre, nothing is terribly offensive. Everything that is off in this game, I've seen done way worse elsewhere, and there were some things I did like. The UI was great. I enjoyed the active inventory that kept your game open while searching through. It almost made it feel like I was in an advanced Eye of the Beholder HUD. And the journal was super in-depth. Huge descriptions of the monsters and items are a welcome addition to any RPG. The magic, while very underpowered in the late game, was simple and fun to use for the first half of the game. And the nostalgia for original Lands of Lore fans was great. Seeing Gladstone in full 3D was such a cool experience. It's not much, but exploring those halls, seeing the throne room and the various shops, it was magical. Exploring Gladstone Woods just made me think back to my first foray into those woods when I was a kid, and some of the Guardians of Destiny throwbacks even had me reminiscing fondly. Even some of the new environments weren't bad. The many realms you explore all felt unique and interesting, and were even occasionally quite impressive. The game does commit one sin that is worse than all others by far. This game, with a beautifully fleshed out fantasy world, makes the insane decision to remove all fantasy races. The four-armed Thomgog? Won't be seeing any. The Hewline Catmen? Not here. The Ugly Dracoid? Well, technically your main character is one, but you could have fooled me. All those really cool things that make a fantasy world feel like a fantasy world are gone. The really stupid thing is none of them are actually canonically gone. They just fail to appear in the game. Like, at all. Removing those huge fantasy elements, especially when the second game was completely focused on them, is such a wildly bad decision. Like, I have to imagine it came down to funding or time, but what is the point of making a fantasy game with all the fantasy removed? Bakata would be rolling in his grave. So the story here takes place after the events of Guardians of Destiny. Though the amount of time after is indeterminate, it can't be that long as all the main characters from the first two games are still kicking around. We start with a mysterious meeting between Budget Diablo and Jekyll. A quick recap. The red guy, the Drauracle, is an ancient godlike being and was a major part of the last 2 games. That's really all the backstory needed for this game to make sense. Anyhow, he's leaving this world and instructs his servant Jekyll to seal the path once he's left. Cut to the woods and we see a meeting between us, our father, and 2 brothers. They're arguing over our right to go on the family pig hunt. Our 2 brothers and father are royalty, whereas we're a bastard child, half Dracoid and half human. As the Dracoid are canonically lizard people, our father is then a certified scaly, right? I'll stop complaining about it after this, but I am not seeing the Dracoid here. We just look like an elf. Anyhow, after some bickering, our father agrees to take us on the pig hunt, but not 2 seconds later a bunch of demon dogs show up and attack the group. Everyone is killed except for us. We just have our souls stolen and get tossed into a ditch. My headcanon is that the demons work for the pigs. We stumble out of the woods and back to Gladstone Keep, where we meet the court sorceress, Dawn. She's had a major downgrade from how she looked in the second game. Went from that sorceress adventurer look to whatever the hell this is. She explains that the dog that attacked us was a rift hound, and it did indeed steal our soul and kill our family. She's placed some sort of magic on us to prevent us from dying, but we need to work quickly to recover our soul before it's too late. She then gives us direction to join a guild and kicks us out of the keep. Out in the wide world, we get to work joining all the guilds. The Mages Guild is probably my favorite. Entering the building reveals a much larger space within. A cool little set piece. Though the Fighters Guild does give them a run for their money, the recruiter there has only 1 leg and sounds like Mr. Krabs.
You must be Copper. I missed you this morning. Anyway, you come here to join the Iron Ring? I guess our guild makes them other sissy guilds look pretty sad, huh?
And what do I have to do?
What is it with all these guys doing SpongeBob impressions? First it was the Necromancer from Deathkeep doing Plankton, and now it's this guy doing Mr. Krabs.
Now your failure shall be complete!
We also joined the Cleric and Thieves Guild, with the latter being deep in the sewers and a major pain in the ass to get to for quests. Our first goal leaving the keep is to get to the Drauracle Cave. Every Lands of Lore game starts like this. What we don't realize at this point is that he isn't in our realm anymore. It doesn't matter though. I get distracted on the way to his cave and find a portal. Being ever curious, I step in and find myself in the lava world. I expect to spend a bunch of time here, but not 30 steps into the place, guess who shows up? The Drauracle himself. It actually jump scared the hell out of me when he came around the corner. I wasn't expecting it at all. He tells us what's going on. Apparently when he left the world, some sort of magical mirror must have broken. Because of this, rifts will be opening up all over the lands, and will leak in to destroy our world if not stopped. In order to fix this, we need to gather the pieces of the mirror from the alternate dimensions, and then rebuild it. In order to do that, we need to get a golden seal from the Drauracle's chambers. So he opens up a portal for us and says he'll meet us there. Stepping in, we find ourselves in the Drauracle's chamber, and his toady, Jekyll, is here. Jekyll then tries using a Drauracle dummy to convince us the Drauracle is still here. This is as good a time as any to point out that this game pretty much just dumps on the lore of the originals. Where Jekyll was the gatekeeper to the mighty Drauracle in the first game, here he comes across as a bumbling fool and comedic character. A theme that follows through this entire game. Like the second game was a lot more tongue-in-cheek than the original, but it still had a worthwhile and interesting story to tell. Here, characters that were once important and mysterious are reduced to a punchline. This was probably the first part in the game where I really realized the writing had been thrown out the window for this one. It's a real shame. Anyhow, after realizing Jekyll wouldn't be helping us, we moved deeper into the Drauracle's lair. Making our way through, I actually really enjoyed the large open areas. Everything feels sort of grand, and there were hallways lined with important screenshots from the second game. It was sort of weird, but very nostalgic. It reminded me of the Drauracle Museum from Guardians of Destiny. At the end, we encounter the Drauracle again, this time in floating head form. He doesn't really tell us anything new, just reiterates that we need to collect mirror pieces and then fix it, or the world will end. We get the seal from him and head back out. Before stepping into the first world, I head back to Gladstone, and I'm able to get a familiar. I grabbed a homunculus girl from the Mages Guild, but I think there were other familiars I could have chosen from the other guilds. She doesn't really do much, but she does float around and occasionally comment on things. She continually asks if you find her attractive too.
You do find me attractive, don't you? I mean, after all, you picked me, you know.
Copper ignores all her advances like the fantasy nerd he is.
It's sort of weird. I guess it's the last remnant of the party system these games used to have. Also, before leaving the city, I explore the poor part of town and I find a general store. For any of you out there wondering what I look like, this is the closest we're going to get to a face reveal. This shopkeeper could be my clone. The skullet, the lack of shoes, a tiny dagger, it all fits. His beard is maybe a bit more majestic than mine, but otherwise it's like looking in a mirror. Maybe I should make him my profile picture. Now that I've been shaken to my core finding my digital self, it's time to explore our first world, the Volcano World. This one is pretty straightforward and linear. You move through a cave, then eventually find a mourning dragon. Apparently her mate was killed when the Draoracle's mirror exploded. Copper, our ever-lovable protagonist, pretty much just mocks and disrespects her like crazy. The second half of this world is exploring the now empty Dragon City. I have to say this area was actually visually quite appealing. Lots of weird set pieces, big open spaces, and eye-catching visuals. Overall, probably one of the more memorable areas of the game. At the end we find the Dragoness again, and when she won't part with the only memory she has of her dead mate, we attack her and kill her for it. Damn, I really feel like a hero. Grabbing the first shard, we're teleported back to the Draoracle's lair to place it. Once there, Jekyll shows up again to cast shade at us, and then forces us to leave the lair through a back exit. This next little bit was sort of neat, in that it's a remake of the original Draoracle caves from Lands of Lore 1, only in 3D. The weird were-rats are even in here. Next world, Iceland. Don't worry, these worlds get slightly less generic as time goes on. This place is full of two-headed poison tigers and Amazon women. After crawling through the tundra for a bit, we come to the castle of the Amazonians. If you'll recall from the first game, these ladies are not very nice. Our last meeting saw them trying to cut out and eat our hearts. Well, this time they're friendly as hell, and want our help with stopping an infestation of flying fire chickens in their tower. Yep, flaming fire chickens. I have no chicken leg joke this time. It's just cool on its face. Now, I think this whole thing was supposed to be a double cross scenario, but I'm pretty sure I accidentally sequence broke the encounter. I got to the end before killing all the chickens, and the leader of the Amazons just attacked me. Weirdly enough, all the other Amazons still seemed friendly to me though. I killed them all anyway. They can't be trusted to wield the power of the mighty fire chicken. Second shard located, 3 more to go. This time when we finish up, we head back to Gladstone Castle to check up on things. Another big nostalgia blast as we meet Nathaniel. The herbalist I thought died in Throne of Chaos. He's working in his shop and being his usual timid self. Next door, the blacksmith's daughter has taken over the family business, but refuses to sell anything to us for now. We move into the throne room and get an audience with King Richard and the ever-obnoxious Jaren, his advisor and longtime asshat from the original. Richard really has nothing to say. As with a lot of these cinematics, it seems like none of them really matter at all. They just rehash the same plot point of explore worlds, get shards. It never goes deeper than that. Further exploring the castle, we can bump into Luther, your character from the second game. He also has very little to say, but does confirm he's going to be marrying Dawn, so I guess the ending I got in the last game was canon. He's also the one that gives us the super sword I mentioned earlier. From here, I've been given permission to shop at the castle blacksmith, but entering her shop I find she just isn't there anymore. Super annoying as she sells some of the best armor in the game, but with her gone I can't buy it. There's a thievery system that should allow me to just steal it, but that doesn't work either. This isn't the first time an NPC will randomly vanish. She never comes back, and I just have to settle for worse armor. One last thing we can do here is interrogate a beast in the prison called a Ruloi. He doesn't actually have much to say outside that his race intend to conquer our world and use us for cattle. These guys actually existed in the second game, and we get to see more of them here. We head back into the woods and find the next portal, which coincidentally leads to the Ruloi homeworld. Their world is an alien-type place with lots of acid pools, and is definitely the most challenging part of the game for a few reasons. Firstly, the Ruloi respawn. The only way to stop their respawning is to destroy their spawners, which are heavily guarded. The Ruloi themselves are actually pretty squishy, but can chain cast magic that will almost instantly kill you. In particular, they cast one spell that puts a stationary purple pillar on the ground that does insane damage. You'll be dead in literally less than a second. It wouldn't be so bad, but they'll just spawn it right underneath you. There's nothing you can do about it. My strategy here was to abuse the invisibility spell to sneak in and take out the spawners, then slowly take out the Ruloi one by one. As a side note, there is a quest here to save a member of the Mages Guild, but I found the jail cell she's supposed to be in empty, making the quest impossible to complete and forever halting my progress with that guild. Very frustrating. The area ends with the world's least interesting fight against the hive mind of the Ruloi. It does nothing to defend itself and just sits there while you kill it. But with ranged and spells doing just about no damage, it takes forever. When it dies, we get shard number 3. Leaving this world behind, now is the time to complete any side quests you still have on the go. At least any that haven't bugged out and become uncompletable, as something happens after finishing the next world. Stepping through portal number 4, the weirdness level jumps up a notch. This is the haunted house dimension. It's not a bad one. The highlights include finding a headless gardener's head for him, saving a ghost from burning alive, and coaxing a piano player with an ancient bottle of wine. The whole thing caps off with what is probably the most interesting boss fight of the game. You're in a dark attic while a Reaper beast attacks from the shadows. You need to shatter a mirror to light up the room, then take him out. It's really easy, but very memorable. Leaving here, only one more shard is needed. But as we move through the woods back to Gladstone, it's clear something is wrong. There are magma paths running through the forest. The Ruloi corruption is all over, and the Frost Realm has taken over a sizable chunk of the woods. New and worse monsters are everywhere. Reaching Gladstone, the city has been obliterated. It's actually a pretty horrifying sight. The place is filled with monsters and flame. Giant, poorly scaled corpses litter the streets. We find the Fighters Guild recruiter impaled, but still alive. He refuses to abandon his post. We also find a castle servant who gives us a message before falling into a fire pit and making the heretic death sound. Harrowing stuff. So a funny thing here. I got kind of annoyed at this part, as from here on, there is zero NPC interaction. I felt I really could have used a bit more story intrigue before the final credits, but there was nothing. I looked up a walkthrough after the fact out of curiosity. There are more story beats here in the city. Apparently you can find the king and Dawn and root out some more of Jaren's bullshit. But I searched the ruins for the better part of an hour, and I never found anything. I mean, maybe I'm just dumb and didn't find it, but making such a critical part of the game and story so difficult to find kinda sucks. Anyhow, nothing more to do here, so we head into the last world, the Shattered Lands. This world starts with a mutant-infested desert, and ends up with exploring the interior of a futuristic compound. It's sort of neat, but feels wildly out of place here. Lands of Lore has never been a game with sci-fi elements, so to have it shoehorned in here at the very end of the series feels wrong. I do think that the area is meant to be a reference to Westwood's other games, but still, it just feels like they're throwing random crap at this to see what sticks. And to me, it made it feel like they had really run out of ideas. You do find a gun here, which is neat, and then the place finishes up with a fight against the AI running the facility. Once again, we claim the final mirror shard and are teleported back to the Draoracle's chamber. But Jekyll is there waiting. He immediately takes the shard and kicks us back to the Shattered Lands. Who could have guessed? The comic relief is the big baddie of our quest. Back in the heart of the facility, we have to run out before it self-destructs. You're given a huge amount of time to do this though, so it doesn't ever really feel that tense. The hardest part is trying to climb back down a ladder from earlier. Back in our world, just one more stop. We need to go to the Draoracle cave and face Jekyll. He moans and whines a whole bunch about how we're blessed to have a god here in our world, and that we can't seal the way and forget about him. We need to keep his memory alive or some other such noise. We end up fighting. It's an alright final fight, but pretty easy. You chase Jekyll through rooms while he casts spells at you. Once he's down, we reclaim the seal, fix the mirror, reclaim our soul, then watch as the rifts seal and the lands are restored. Afterward, we try to escape the Draoracle's cave and get crushed by a bunch of rocks as the credits roll. Luckily, this isn't actually how the game ends. If you're patient and wait for the credits to finish, the game pops back up and we see Copper narrowly avoided a squashing. We get to walk a few feet into the woods and find Jaren stealing the crown jewels. In what is actually an amazing decision, the series ends with you brutally murdering Jaren in the woods. He isn't even hard, he just has a shitty dagger he pokes with. Once he's dead, we get one final scene of us with Richard, back in the woods, and finally going on that pig hunt we were so excited about. While I think it would be a touch dramatic to say I regret playing Lands of Lore 3, I have to admit the experience left me feeling a bit hollow. Throne of Chaos was a game that probably helped shape my tastes in games as a whole, and while it took me a few decades to play the second installment, that one was an instant classic for me as well. I had heard this entry was bad, but I had hoped that much like the second game, I would find enjoyment where others did not. That sadly wasn't the case. Throne of Chaos was one of the greatest dungeon crawlers of all time. Beautiful pixel artwork in a sprawling and atmospheric quest to save the king and stop Scotia. Memorable characters and distinct locations throughout. Lands of Lore 2, while a massive departure from the original, featured another sprawling quest as you go from a cursed peasant to donning the mantle of the gods themselves. Unique and exciting gameplay features. And though the game was controversial and flawed in its own way, I found it so memorable and worthwhile. Then there's this. The great fantasy races and lore are just gutted out of the game in its entirety. Important characters and plot lines from the first games are reduced to punchlines. And worst of all, the game just didn't feel like an adventure. Both previous games had this feel of progressing through a giant fantasy world. Here, we did travel to different dimensions, but all were contained in this tiny hub world of Gladstone. You'll fumble through the same forest path 20 times on your quest. You'll dash through the Draoracle's cave a half-dozen times. There was no feeling of forward momentum, no feeling of pursuit or quest. The previous games had unforgettable villains that haunted your steps through the entire journey. Terrible and intimidating. The Dark Sorceress Scotia was an ever-present threat in Throne of Chaos, and the Dark God Belial was an excellent villain in the sequel, with his mutant clones dogging you every step of the way. Here, our villain is literally the game's comic relief, and is only identified as such in the closing moments. It just felt like such a terrible choice, and such a slap in the face to the legacy of the prior games. In terms of the gameplay, while nothing it did was inherently bad, it was all just so vanilla. Like it's the definition of, make me a fantasy game with some spells and whatnot. There's nothing that stands out as innovative or exciting. Even Guardians of Destiny had the shape-shifting mechanic, and while I wasn't a huge fan of it, I could at least say the developers were trying to do something different. While I wouldn't recommend this game to any but the most diehard fans, I will say I have nothing but respect for Westwood and the many, many masterpieces they've released over the years. It's just a shame to see how bad a state the company must have been in when this title was released. While the game wasn't the rousing conclusion I was hoping for to the Lands of Lore trilogy, I do feel happy to have finally finished the 3. If you decide to give it a play yourself, just remember to stop by Buck's General Store and say hello. See you in the next video.